Good morning, everybody. Greetings from Clasheen. Thank you so much if you are joining me live on this Saturday morning, or if you are watching on the replay, please remember you can leave me a comment after in the description of the video below. You can leave me a comment afterwards, and I will be happy to answer your questions for you. So, who am I and where do I live? My name is Nicola Brown. I'm a textile artist developing a sustainable practice in rural Southeast Ireland. My primary focus is eco-printing without using traditional powdered mordants and wet felting. I grow all my own vegetation and plants to use for natural dye, eco-printing, and in the studio. So if you'd like to drop me a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from, that's wonderful. And if you have a question about eco-printing in the dirty pot, I am going to just do a brief recap over the process. I'm going to answer recently from people who have either been watching my videos on YouTube or have read my Eco-Printing in the Dirty Pot ebook. So I hope I'm going to answer some of the questions in what I'm chatting about. But if you have a question, please can you drop it in the live stream comments with a few question marks in front and behind your question. I'm monitoring the comments by myself, and that way it just makes it easy for me to see your question. So the first thing is, if you're new to eco-printing or you're used to working in a more in the more usual way and using powdered mordants, you may be asking yourself, what is eco-printing in the dirty pot? So eco-printing in the dirty pot is when we work using the metal of the pot, the composition of the pot, and also what we put into the pot to help influence the color we can achieve, the prints, the background color, and also to help make the pieces more washable and color fast. So it's probably important to understand what a traditional powdered mordant is before you know for sure how you can use the pot as mordant. So a traditional powdered mordant, it's basically a chemical. It's a powdered metal salt, such as aluminium sulfate, copper sulfate, aluminium acetate, etc., etc. And traditionally for natural dyeing, you would have prepared your fabric prior to dyeing by giving it a really good wash or scour, and then you would have brought it to temperature in a solution of your chosen mordant. You would have held the temperature for an hour, and in many cases then turned your heat off and allowed that pot liquid to cool overnight. And what would happen is your mordant of choice would have structurally altered the composition of the fabric. In general, you shouldn't feel that difference, although personally, I find with alum acetate, I think silk feels slightly different from silk that hasn't been mordanted. I can feel the difference under the tips of my finger, but you would mordant your fabric beforehand, then you would give it a rinse to remove any loose molecules that hadn't stuck to the fabric, and then you would go ahead and you would dye or you would eco-print. So when we're working without traditional powdered mordants, we're using the composition of our pot to actually help us achieve good color. And the best pot to start with, if you are new to eco-printing without using traditional powdered mordants, you couldn't do better than starting with an aluminium pot. Aluminum might be how you refer to it if you live in America. And it's important to understand that this pot needs to boil when you are working without the powdered mordants. So one of the best heat sources is gas to bring that pot liquid up to a hot enough temperature. And Also, firing a pot by wood is very good. You can get the pot liquid very hot. You need to be careful that if you are using some other sort of heat source, A, that you can get your pot hot enough, but B, if you're boiling the pot for sustained periods of time, which is necessary when eco-printing, you may have issues. I have had a few students who have had hobs crack. So if you are working in your kitchen rather than having a dedicated pot outside or in a garage or in a studio, you need to be careful. You need to just make sure that what you are doing in your pot is suitable for your kitchen. And on that note, it's important that you also, if you do choose to work inside, health and safety is of paramount importance. So make absolutely sure that if you're working inside, you have a window open, you have adequate ventilation, you'll be creating a lot of steam, and you should ideally wear a mask if you're in a very small confined space. And Kim, yes, metal salts are the mordants are a powdered metal salt. And until relatively recently, metals such as chrome and tin, that was also used commercially and privately. And chrome and tin apparently are marvelous mordants. They have a very, very effective result on the outcome of natural dyeing. However, they have been highlighted in latter years that they are an extremely hazardous metal to be dealing with, and they actually, unfortunately, have been leading to cancer apparently. So alum sulfate is the least toxic of the mordants that would be traditionally used, and an aluminium saucepan in some way mimics the effect of what the alum sulfate would do. And depending on the fabric that you would be mordanting, you would have different preparations. So if you're working with fabric, let's just say which fabric would be the best to use. As a new eco printer, it's significantly easier to eco print without the mordants in the dirty pot if you're working with a protein based fabric. And those fabrics come, for want of a better word, from an animal. So for those, we are talking about silk, we're talking about wool, we're talking about cashmere, mohair, yak, camel, quivet. There are many, many fabrics and fibers that come from wool, but the easiest to work with as a beginner, wool and silk. And because of that very fact, it's also important to understand that this is one reason why wet felting combines so beautifully with eco printing, because felt is comprised of an animal fiber and then sometimes with an embellishing fiber, which may or may not be an animal fiber. And Kim has a comment here saying you certainly wouldn't want to inhale them, and that's exactly it, Kim. It's not so much working with the solution of a traditional mordant that causes the most is the most likely to have a health implication on your body. It's actually inhaling the metals, and our lungs can't expel them, and then you build up that metal in your lungs, and that is a serious issue. Whereas when we're working in the dirty pot, we also make something called homemade rust water. And this is where we just allow rainwater, or we pour water, maybe a little bit of vinegar, into a pot. Now, I am lucky enough that I have plenty of old cast iron skillets and cooking pots. I've picked them up over the years, and I can make a lovely strong solution of rust water very quickly, because these pots have very thick walls and little bits of rusty metal. They're all flaking off and they're going into that solution. But I do have a full video about how to make your own rust water. And after this live stream ends, I'm going to drop a link to that video in the video description for this particular question and answer session. So I have some videos already on YouTube, which you may find very helpful. And one of them is all about making your own homemade rust water. And this is actually most useful if you decide that you would like to print on cellulose fabric. That would be fabric that comes from a plant. So something such as this top that I'm wearing, this is a cellulose fabric. You could have linen, cotton, ramie. There are plenty of cellulose fabrics. And for the purpose of eco-printing, we also include man-made fabrics that originate from wood pulp. So viscose, rayon, tencel, which comes from eucalyptus pulp. All of those fabrics may be treated as if they are cellulose, and they will be possible to print in the dirty pot. So the first thing is we're using the metal of the pot to help influence the colors. At times we're using rust water, or we're adding rusty metal into our pot, and that helps enhance the colors. We're working on wool, or we are working on silk, hopefully, as a beginner. And you may be saying to yourself, gosh, cotton is very much less expensive to buy than wool or silk. But I recommend you ask around, because often people will have old woolen blankets just put away in their house, and they don't know what to do with them anymore, because many people are not actually using blankets on their beds. They're using duvets, continental quilts. So ask around, and you may very well be surprised how many woolen blankets you can pick up, and they make absolutely wonderful to print on. And another aspect of developing a sustainable practice, such as I have, and what I really enjoy helping participants of workshops, etc., understand, is that it's really important to be mindful of the environment, and rather than just throwing things out, keep reusing, reducing, recycling. I'm always going to charity shops, thrift stores, op shops when I'm out and about, to see if there's something there that would be possible to include in the studio, rather than buying new fabric all the time. And you can see here this little flat metal iron that I have up on the screen. That particular iron, that one I got in a vintage and antique store when I was over teaching in France. And so that's a wonderful little iron, and that's what I add to my pot to help enhance the colors. So gosh, Mona, really nice to see you. Mona is joining us from Kashmir. That's wonderful. Mona, you're saying that you often miss watching the videos. I do have, everything is hosted on YouTube afterwards. So for anybody who would like to watch this as a repeat, or for those people who miss the live stream, it is totally possible to watch all the videos afterwards and to leave your questions then. But thank you so much, Mona, for joining us today. That's wonderful. So the aluminium pot is the best to start with. The protein-based fabric is definitely the best to start with if you're new to eco-printing in the dirty pot. And a question that has come in several times recently to me via comments and questions on various social media posts. And I've realized people have a fear about it or a worry about it. And that is actually how to prepare the fabrics prior to eco-printing in the dirty pot. People are concerned. Traditionally, they've learned that they use certain proprietary cleaners, and they do what is called scouring fabric. That's basically removing all traces of any finishing that might have been on the fabric. when it was prepared in the mill, or if it's clothing that you're upcycling and you're eco-printing secondhand clothing, for example, you want to make sure that any washing powder or finishing that's impregnated in that fabric from any use or previous owner, that has to be really, really washed out well. So what I find works the best for me is a gentle olive oil soap. And you could use any form of a gentle soap. So something with a high oil content is best. I prefer a soap with no artificial scents and no color, but I don't mind if it's a very natural organic oil, for example, let's just say a lavender oil or something like that in the soap. That's okay. But anything highly artificial, try and strip it back. Have the most gentle soap you can use. I use a bar of soap and I grate that soap, the olive oil soap, and I make a liquid solution and I batch wash all my pieces in the washing machine. And I just put a couple of teaspoons of that soapy solution into the machine instead of a washing powder or a detergent. Now, the reason for this, the reason I don't use any of the proprietary cleaners is that even if they're what they call an eco or a green solution, a green washing liquid, they often have different things called stain blasters in them. And those might be natural stain blasters. They might be something that's going to help bleach the fabric. What you actually want is you want to encourage the print. Think of it like a stain. You want to encourage that print to have the absolute best chance of impregnating itself, of getting totally fixed into the fabric you're printing on. So by using a natural soap and giving your piece a really good wash beforehand, this actually works the best in my experience. So that's what I recommend people do. And when you're starting out, if you're only going to print a few pieces at the one time, I would just wash those by hand, warm water, and use your bar of soap and wash them aggressively and to give them a really, really good rinse to make sure that there's no soap left in the fabric. So that's how I would prepare my protein-based fabric. For my cellulose-based fabric, in addition to washing it with the olive oil soap, I would use hot, much hotter water. I would put it through a more aggressive wash in the washing machine. And I would also add a pinch of sodium carbonate or something called washing soda. And that affects the pH level and it helps get the cellulose-based fabric stripped more of any finishing that was included in the place where it was initially woven. So that's just a tip for you. If you have access to washing soda, in Ireland, it would be in the cleaning supplies section. You can just put a teaspoon of that into one full wash of cellulose-based fabric, as well as your olive oil soap or your gentle soap, and it does help prepare the fabric best for eco-printing. So once you've got your fabric prepared, you're using an aluminium pot, and you're then going to get yourself organized, you may be asking what vegetation is the best for eco-printing. Now, I would say as a beginner, I would definitely recommend that your first eco-prints you use onion skins. They are absolutely guaranteed to give you really, really good results. But eucalyptus trees, if you have access to eucalyptus, all parts of the eucalyptus tree will provide wonderful color in the eco-printing pot. And many, many of the leaves give spectacular prints as well. So they are also definitely worth trying. And in relation to the eucalyptus tree, every part, the leaves, the bark, the flower buds, the seed pods, every part provides color. So not every part provides a red color. I'll share some photographs afterwards showing you some colors of what you can hope to achieve with eucalyptus, but not every eucalyptus tree provides red color, but it will actually give you fantastic results. You will get some sort of color. And there's a question from Jessica. She's saying, isn't it unsafe to wash woolens in very hot water? Yes, Francesca, I wash the woolens and silk in the wool wash. It's only the cellulose fabric that I recommend washing in the very hot wash. Cellulose, so cotton, linen, ramie, viscose, I would use a hot wash for them, but I would use the wool wash for woolens. And I also think it's in relation to that, it's important to understand that we are using a lot of heat in the Ecoprinting pot. And if something is going to have a tendency to shrink, this happens much more with secondhand garments. So, for example, if you buy a cashmere or a wool sweater in a thrift store, if you're going to wash that garment and you're going to eco-print the garment, it's far better if it is going to shrink slightly. I'm not saying everything doesn't shrink, but I would say probably only 3 or 4% of garments shrink, providing you wash them on the woolen wash. And when they go in the eco-printing pot, that is something a lot of people have a fear about, because the liquid is going to be boiling. People are afraid that it will shrink. But what happens, we are actually creating bundles where the fabric and the vegetation is tied so tightly, it's so compressed in the pot. And what actually causes shrinking is heat and agitation. So that is a biggie. If your bundles are tied really, really tightly, you are not going to get the shrinkage that you might expect in the dirty pot. So in relation to vegetation, I would recommend, as a beginner, I recommend onion skins. I recommend rose leaves, because I think they're easy to access almost everywhere in the world. And if you don't have roses growing in your own vicinity, if you are near any flower shop, or if you have any friend who's got a bouquet of flowers, you can just save the rose leaves and use those. So rose leaves and blackberry leaves, whether the blackberry is cultivated in the garden or whether it is wild in the hedgerows. And I do have some videos about vegetation. So I have a video about saving vegetation and different ways of saving leaves, because I'm aware that we're not all in the same time zone. So you may have access to vegetation at different times of the year than me. So I have a video about saving vegetation. And I also have a video specifically about eucalyptus leaves. And so I'll drop links to them in the video description when this live stream ends. I will also drop a link to a document that I have. It's all about using eucalyptus leaves and bark as well, it's about the different varieties of eucalyptus that give red. And if you're interested in joining my mailing list and you click on that link, you can join the mailing list, and I give you a free PDF file with all the information about different eucalyptus varieties that give fantastic reds too. So I'm just going to look at a couple of comments now, and then I'll go back to what I am. Okay, here we go. Here's Mona, what I'm chatting about. So, which part of the onion skin should we use? That is a really good question, Mona. So it is very definitely the dry part, that papery outside of the onion skin. And if you start using that inner fleshy skin, you are going to make your garments or whatever you are printing stink. They will smell so badly of onions, and you will never ever be able to get that smell out. Clearly that's happened to me in the past, otherwise I wouldn't know that. So definitely you use that outside papery layer of the onion skin. And when I started eco printing in the dirty pot, strangely enough, I got almost identical colored prints from brown onions and the red onions, from the skin of those two types of onions. But over the last number of years, I've been getting different colored prints from both types of skin. And my favorite skin, my absolute favorite onion skin to use is brown onion. It gives much more golden and rich, warm toned prints than the red onion skin. In the dirty pot, when the onion skin, when there's rusty metal in the pot, the onion skin tends to go a more purpley color, and that's not my personal favorite color. And sometimes then it goes sort of a greenish color afterwards, after you've neutralized and washed out your fabric, which I will talk about in a minute. So maybe I'll just share some a few pictures of onion skin printed pieces, because it's important also to understand that the vegetation looks different depending on the different fabric that you're printing it on, and also which pipe you roll your piece on. So I'm going to share a few pictures of different pieces printed with onion skin. But when I talk about a pipe, you can see here on the table, I've got a selection of pipes. So these are just other things that are helpful in your studio. I've got a cast iron pipe, I've got a copper pipe, I have string, which I totally reuse multiple times when I'm tying my bundles, sharp scissors. And when I'm working with wool and silk, I also, after that wash that the fabric has had, I then soak the fabric overnight in water, or a water and vinegar solution. Vinegar helps sharpen the colors. So I highly recommend that you soak your fabric overnight before eco printing, and that will help you achieve more vibrant colors. So I'll just flip through some images of onion skins on different fabric, just so you can see how fantastic the onion skins print. So as a new eco printer, I think it's important to work with something that will give you a good result, so you're not dealing with another thing that could be a problem. So try onion skins. So this is a highly textured Nuno felt skirt that I made. Here you can see that Maya, who's modeling for me, she's got a beautiful golden toned silk draped around her shoulders underneath that raw fleece wrap. And that particular silk, that was rolled on a copper pipe, so the tones are more golden. Here's a silk shirt, and this is a very matte, flat silk, and there was very little rusty metal in that pot. So the onion skin prints are not totally as strong as they would be on this particular piece here. And this is an interesting fabric. This is a silk, and it has some cotton in the weave. So those little dots, if you see there, they look much whiter. And those little dots are cotton, and it makes them stand out much more. And although it's more difficult to see the definition of the prints with this piece, you actually can see them when they're there in your hand. It's a little bit see-through. And here are onion skins on felt. So as I say, onion skins are an absolutely marvelous thing to start with, because they're absolutely guaranteed to give you prints. And that's what I recommend you start with. Here's a question from, let's see here, from Nicola. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So greetings from Ireland. Lovely to see you joining in from Georgia. So in relation to a masterclass, what I actually am doing now, I have a new model for my business, because I'm helping care for my mom and another relative. And so I don't have as much time for hands-on classes or online workshops per se. However, I have an intensive eco print and wet felt club The membership is currently closed, but it is going to open again at the beginning of August for a very, very limited time. And basically what that is it's an ongoing membership club. We work using a platform called Kajabi. So there's a library with all sorts of information, tips, advice, and video tutorials. We have a private Facebook group, and I do private live streams a couple of times each month, answering questions and training, intensive trainings. And the concept is that whether you're a beginner or more experienced eco printer, I will be helping you achieve the results that you would like to achieve. So if you're interested, Nuka, in joining my mailing list, I'm going to drop some links into the video description below, but I'm also dropping a link for some information about eucalyptus. So if you wanted to click on the link for the document about eucalyptus and the different varieties that work really well, you could join the mailing list, and then you'll be kept updated the next time that opens for registration. So it will be in the summer. And something that's important in relation to identifying eucalyptus leaves, if you don't know what the tree is, the only way you can see if it's going to give you good color is to actually try it in the pot. So let's continue. So we've got the pot we're going to use is aluminium. This is my recipe for success. The pot we're using is aluminium. The fabric we're using is wool or silk. It's had a really, really good wash with a gentle olive oil soap. It's been soaked overnight in water or a water and vinegar solution. The vegetation that I recommend you start with is onion skins, and the pot, aluminium, the pipes, maybe cast iron or copper. You do not have to roll up on a pipe or some sort of a core, but it's significantly easier if you do, because that way you can have the modification. You can have extra help from the metal. The metal composition of the pipe is going to help with the results that you can achieve in the pot. Now, you bring your pot to a boil. I'm not going to discuss the actual full setting up of the dirty pot now, because I have a video about that, and it gives you sort of like a recipe for how to set that up. So that link is going to be in this video description. But basically it's an aluminium pot. It's got vinegar, it's got water, it's got some rusty metal. It's boiled for maybe an hour at the beginning, and then I would also add some eucalyptus leaves or bark if I had it. And after my bundles go in the pot, I would add some onion skins. But you can find that information in a video, and I'll link to that video in the description below. So I'm really just giving you a roadmap for what you can do, and I'm happy to answer your questions in a minute if you have any other ones. So how long to process for? And this is an interesting question, because different vegetation requires different lengths of processing times. But onion skins, they don't mind a shorter processing time or a longer processing time. But when we are working in the dirty pot without traditional powdered mordants, we definitely have to process our bundles for significantly longer than people who are working with those chemical metal salts. Because if you remember at the beginning, I said that they have chemically altered the structure of their fabric and made their fabric receptive to the color. But for us, it's a longer process. So I would say that when you're starting out, a really good time to boil your pieces for is 2.5 hours. And onion skins and many leaves give fantastic prints between 2 and 2.5 hours. So 2.5 hours will guarantee, if you've got the correct vegetation, that you will definitely get prints. But if you're working with eucalyptus trees, that's why my download about eucalyptus leaves is very handy. Many, many eucalyptus trees release their best color after 4 or 5 hours boiling. However, there are some varieties that do give excellent results earlier than that. So maybe I'll just show you a few pictures of pieces now. So let's see here. So this here is a felt a piece. It's a sample I did for an online workshop, and this is actually handmade felt. And the red print on the bottom left hand side of this image, that's a Eucalyptus cordata leaf. The larger leaf to the right at the bottom is a sycamore or Acer pseudoplatanus. Now in Ireland we call that sycamore, and in America I think it's called sycamore maple, but it's Acer pseudoplatanus. And then the leaves on the top right are blackberry leaf. So that's one side of a piece of felt. Here is an example of eucalyptus leaves on felt, but I have used a cellulose, which is a plant-based fiber, on the surface of the felt. And that means that because the cellulose doesn't absorb the color in the same way as the silk or wool would, you can see that white fiber as an embellishment on the top. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. And feel free to share this with any of your friends afterwards if you're interested. So here's another example. This is onion skins on felt. And this is another image of onion skins on felt. It's the same piece. And you can see the little white tracing of color on the surface of the felt. That is from the embellishing fibers. And if we look at both sides of the same piece, so onion skins on one side, and then on the other side, the matte surface that there are no embellishing fibers, that is, you know, you can see that the colors are very beautiful, and they're two different effects, and that's on the same piece of fabric. So I just see if there are a few more questions coming in that I haven't addressed. So let me just answer those. So Mona is asking, would I do a session on eco dyeing too? So Mona, I use my own homegrown plant material to natural dye. However, it's not my bigger speciality, and I would prefer to just share things that I am more experienced with and that I feel I can talk with a lot more knowledge about. That doesn't mean that I'm not able to natural dye, but it's not something that I specialize in. I specialize in working without mordants. I might consider doing a video, now that you're asking about it, of natural dyeing using eucalyptus without traditional mordants. So eucalyptus is really interesting. It is called, so it's substantive. That's a phrase that means that the dye color that it releases, it stays in the fabric. So even without traditional powdered mordants, if you print with eucalyptus, it will be totally color and light fast. So that is something I might consider, but other forms of natural dyeing, it's not something that I'm really considering doing now because it's not my speciality. So Francesca is asking about what solution, the vinegar solution. So, oh, hi from New Zealand, fantastic. So in Ireland, it's not so easy for me to get large quantities of vinegar, and it's quite expensive. If I had access to huge quantities of vinegar, I would be saying, you know, anywhere 50%, even higher, of vinegar solution to soak your protein-based fabrics in prior to eco-printing. You definitely see a sharpening of the color and an intensification of the color. The difference between vinegar and a mordant: vinegar is considered a modifier, and that means it modifies the color that you achieve. However, a mordant chemically alters the structure. So if I wash fabric that I have already prepared with in vinegar, if I wash that afterwards, the vinegar will wash out. So there is a difference between a mordant and a modifier. Vinegar is a modifier, but in my experience, I get better results when I use vinegar. And if I'm working on something like an old woolen blanket or a large piece of upholstery wool fabric, I did a collaboration with a designer for furniture. So here, for example, this is a chair with upholstery wool. So that, and here's an ottoman or a footstool. If I'm doing something like that, it's very heavy when you're trying to squeeze out the excess water before you lay out your vegetation. So what I like to do is spin the pieces in the washing machine to make sure that the soaking water has been removed so that your pieces are damp. But then I would sprinkle the vinegar on top of that. And for those of you who are who haven't seen some of my videos before, there is quite a comprehensive video. It's called Ecoprinting in the Dirty Pot Boot Camp Day 1. And that would be a video that goes into a lot of this as well. And you'll see more photographs there. And a question from, let's see here. So Nikki Antoinette, I haven't tried Plantago as a mordant, and I'm not even sure where I would access it, but I have tried Simplocose, which is a plant-based powdered mordant. Simplocose is a plant that absorbs alum from the soil. It's an alum accumulator, and they grind the leaves of this plant, and you can use that as a mordant. And I have done that, and I have thought about using that in the past, but it gives very yellow colors, and it totally changes the color of the prints that you can achieve. And personally, I prefer the prints without the mordant, interestingly enough. I loved the concept of working with Simplocose, but I prefer the prints without using Simplocose. So I'm just going to go and see now. So how long to process for, different lengths of time for different materials, how to set the dirty pot up. I'll drop a link to a video and that will give you the information about that. So once you have processed your bundles, and I've been getting several questions recently about how do I finish my fabric or my garments? And this is really important. It's not complicated. I think people are stressed that they're going to make a mistake or something is going to happen when they're washing their pieces out. If you're only finishing 1 or 2 pieces, just wash them by hand. And it is absolutely vital that you wash until your water runs clear. So the reason for this is that with any form of natural dyeing or eco-printing, there will be dye molecules that have not adhered or impregnated into your fabric. They're sitting on the surface of the fabric. So it may look like you have fantastic color and prints, but actually they're only sitting on the surface and they're not stable. You don't want to have something like, for example, this piece that I'm wearing. I have white couches downstairs. I'm up in my dining room come computer station here. I don't want to sit on white couches and wear something like this garment and have the prints rub off onto the white couch. I want to be able to wear whatever I've made. If it's a wearable piece, I want to wear it with confidence. And I want to make sure that the dye that is impregnated in the fabric is visible. So I rinse the pieces first very quickly. And if they have been wrapped on any sort of an iron or rusty metal pipe. So remember, we had these pipes. If they're wrapped on any iron pipe or a rusty metal pipe, they need to be neutralized as well as washed. So what I do in that case is I use bicarbonate of soda from my larder, but you can also use bread soda or baking powder. Bread soda is something we use in Ireland, or baking powder, but bicarbonate of soda is what I usually use. And if I'm neutralizing a piece that is like a silk scarf, I will use about 1/4 teaspoon. But a piece, when I printed this fabric, for example, for this particular top, I would have used a couple of teaspoons because it was a heavier weight of fabric. And what I do is I make a solution with the bicarbonate of soda. I dissolve it in water, in warm water. and I put the fabric in and I let it soak for a minimum of 15 minutes, often a couple of hours. Then I give the fabric a quick hand rinse, and then I put it through my washing machine. Remember, from preparing the fabric, we used a gentle soap such as an olive oil or a palm oil, coconut oil soap. So you use the same soap for washing it and finishing it. If you're washing it by hand, just continue washing the garment or the fabric until no more dye is coming out. That is really important. And then I always iron everything, including my silk or my Nuno felt. I iron everything on both sides on the hottest setting of my iron when it comes out of the washing machine, when it's damp. I don't let it get dry before I iron it, or that is the way to have loads of creases in your pieces afterwards. So that's really what I do. Now, if you have any questions, please just ask them now, because I realize I've been talking for quite a while, and it's a good opportunity to ask me a question. But if you don't have any questions, I'll drop links to the various videos that you may find helpful. I'll drop them into the video description. It'll take me about 5 minutes after the live stream ends. And if you're watching on the replay, please ask questions by comment afterwards. And if you're interested, I have a Facebook group. There is a link to that also in the video description. And that group is dedicated to people who are interested in using this more health conscious and, you know, environmentally mindful way of printing, using the pot as mordant, the dirty pot. So that's a Facebook group for people interested in this technique and also in wet felting. So I'd love to see some of you over there on the Facebook group. I know that some of you are there already. And if you're interested in a more in-depth look into the total foundation of eco-printing in the dirty pot, I have a comprehensive ebook, and that's like a step-by-step guide and checklists, etc. Plenty of information to really help you get to grips with working without powdered mordants. And then for those of you who are interested in a much more intensive and immersive ongoing experience, in August, I'll be opening my EcoPrint and Wet Felt Club up for membership again. And okay, so let's see. So here Melanie has something coming up here. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Melanie. Melanie is saying, I purchased your Eco Dyeing ebook and it is a gem. Would it be optimal to use full strength white vinegar on protein and cellulose fiber in the soak prior to eco printing? Great question, Melanie. When I have been facilitating workshops abroad, that I have used full strength white vinegar. So if I had access to loads, I would have no problem soaking my protein based fabrics in the vinegar overnight. However, with the cellulose fabric, I just soak it in water, and then the cellulose fabric is getting that rust water dip in the homemade rust water. And I mentioned that in the book, Melanie. It's a 40-second dip for the best results. So you don't actually need the vinegar soak if you're doing your cellulose fabric. And Francesca is saying something. So I've been admiring your top and how the pattern is restricted to certain panels with plain sleeves. I'm guessing you sewed it together after dyeing. Yes, I did. And I'll just stand up. Let me remove that. So this piece, you can also see there are some more square sort of, it's probably not the easiest to see, sort of some squarish patterns in that panel as well. So instead of rolling this on a metal pipe, I actually folded this particular piece on square metal plates. It's a bit difficult with the camera. It's doing the reverse to what I want. This is cellulose. So I'm not going to mention what the name of this fabric is, but it's spelled HEMP, and I get flagged on YouTube if I say the word. So that's what this is, and it took the color really nicely. This was done with the rust water dip and the metal, and yes, I sewed it together afterwards, and I also put pieces on the sleeves. I really like the combination of a plain fabric with an eco-printed fabric. And while it might be nice to go around looking like a tree at times, it's more wearable, I think, when you combine both together if you are going to sew. I absolutely love eco-printing garments, the whole garment. But when I'm making something from scratch, I tend to go for a combination of plain and patterned. Okay, so you're welcome, Melanie. There wouldn't be a problem, Melanie, if you did soak your cellulose fabric in the vinegar water and then had a rust water dip. That's not a problem, but there's no need to do that vinegar soak. And what I do when I make a vinegar water solution, I would use that quite a few times unless it was starting to get a horrible scum on the top of the water. But bear in mind, every time you put your damp fabric that you've soaked in plain water into vinegar, if you've soaked your fabric beforehand, every time you put it into vinegar, you're going to be diluting that vinegar a little bit. So what I then do is I add that vinegar water into my eco-printing pot liquid, because that then helps intensify the colors that I get in the pot. And just a tip for you, eucalyptus leaves absolutely adore having vinegar in the pot. I think I'll show you a few photos. I think I might have some more here. Yeah. Okay, so let's see now. I don't know how I can make that bigger. Yeah. So these images are actually upright, so you're not going to see them quite so big maybe on your screen. This eucalyptus tree printed green. Unfortunately, I do not know the variety. It was in Australia when I was facilitating a retreat up on Lake Macquarie, but it gave absolutely beautiful green prints. And each time we were printing with a lot of vinegar or a lot of eucalyptus in the pot, we did add some more vinegar. Here, that's eucalyptus bark on linen. Those are eucalyptus leaves from my own trees and bark on wool. Let's see, are there any more? This is cotinus or smoke bush. These are cotinus prints on HEMP. And again, I've combined the printed fabric with a plain, and there you can see the whole garment there. I did that during a pattern test. This one here is a cashmere dress, and I also have a silk scarf on. So that dress was printed in a cast iron pot, actually. I love working in really big, my favorite big pot. I'm just going to see, yeah. Here's a picture of my favorite big pot. So it's a really, really big cast iron pot, and that pot intensifies the color. And so that was that dress was mixed eucalyptus leaves and an onion skin printed scarf. Let me see, are there any more? Again, eucalyptus leaves on felt, eucalyptus and onion skins on felt. And you can also eco-print on paper. So if you would be interested in a little tutorial about eco-printing on paper, please can you just let me know in the comments. It's something I've considered doing for YouTube, but I haven't done it yet. So if you would like an eco-printing tutorial on paper, just say yes, please, in the comments, and I'll know you're interested. And let me see here now. Thank you so much, Nicola, for sharing your knowledge, experience, and passion. Marvelous source of information and tips. Very generous artist, Ags. Thank you so much. That is really nice of you. Thank you so much, Ags. I really appreciate that. I am passionate about what I do, and I love sharing information. I suppose teaching is something that I really enjoy, and because I love what I do, it's hard not to share the information. And I'm very happy to do that, you know, through YouTube, through the Facebook group. People who join something like the membership club, they get extra little nuances, extra tutorials, small things that are not on YouTube or on Facebook, and in-depth training about things that I don't necessarily share elsewhere online. So people might be saying, why would you join the group? Because I do give a lot of information away free, but it just takes you to another level, and I can help people individually achieve the results that they want. Because obviously there are not enough hours in the day to answer everybody's question online otherwise. Thank you so much. Okay, so here we have people, yes, wanting to use paper. Aideen, yes. Liz, yes. And there will be more in the library about that, Liz. Now, just to say about, you see the way, if I look at Liz here. So Liz and Julian Marsh, Facebook profile, Facebook image. And here is Aideen. Aideen's image is there as well. Now, Kim's image is here as well. However, if you see something and it says Facebook user, yes, please. And if you see here, I'm guessing this is Ags because there are also some emojis. So when you see something and it says Facebook user and it doesn't show your Facebook profile like Kim's, before you join me on another live stream, if you look up at the top of your screen, maybe on that side, before you join the live stream, it may ask you, would you like to give StreamYard access to your Facebook profile? And basically, StreamYard is the software that I'm using to deliver these live streams. And what happens if you allow StreamYard access, you will be able to see an image of your face. And then I know who you are. And it's easy for me to answer your question. It sounds strange, but it's slightly easier when I know who I'm talking to answer your questions. So you've got one final chance. If you have any other questions, please drop them as a comment right now. But otherwise, I would like to say over and out from Clasheen. Thank you so much for giving your time and joining me. I really, really do appreciate it. Feel free to share any of my videos with your friends if you think they might enjoy them. And don't be afraid to let me know what you're interested in learning more about. And I see we don't have any more questions today, so I think it's time for me to go and thanks very much, Maggie. Lovely to see you here. I think it's time for me to go and give Pip, my dog, a walk and have a late breakfast. So thank you all so much. Over and out from Clasheen. See you in the next video.